I'm here with artist and metalsmith Julie Sanford, and I am so excited about this segment because it's a two-parter. We'll do the beginning this week, and then we'll finish it up next week. Yay! Welcome, Julie.
Well, thanks. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Katie.
You're welcome.
Thanks. I'm really excited to show this segment in processing metals. So we're talking about metal fabrication. And metal fabrication just means that you are creating jewelry just basically with raw materials. So there's a few different ways that we source raw materials as jewelers. The first and most popular way is to take and order materials through your jewelry supply places. You can get copper wire from hardware stores. But one of my favorite places to find copper is at a metal recycling facility. So a lot of times other industries would use copper, such as plumbers and electricians. And the pieces that they don't use, they're scrap metal. They'll take and they'll sell it for scrap. So some metal recycling facilities have a retail component. So you can go in there and you can dig through their bins and their boxes, and you can find pieces that you can use yourself.
I think that sounds like fun.
It is. It's a lot of fun. It's like a treasure hunt sometimes too, because you really never know what you're going to get. So the cons for that is that, one, you don't know what you're going to get. You might go thinking that I need, this size wire for my jewelry, and you're not going to find it, but you might find lots of other great stuff too. So what I have here in front of me is some copper that I've salvaged, that I've rescued, liberated from the recycling. And I have found, on my last trip, I found some roofing copper, which is what this is. Lucky, right. It's like 24 gauge copper, so it's really great for making jewelry. And then this is just a big cable, big copper cable that electricians would use, and it's too short to use for anything. So,
are there any other types of metals that you might be looking for when you're scavenging like that?
Sometimes you can find brass and bronze, and even household things people drop off to metal recyclers, so you just never know what you're going to find. I found like a bronze lantern there before, and a copper cauldron, so there's just, like I said, it's a treasure hunt. You never know what you're going to find.
Right.
So when you do find, so this would be a wire. I have also found tubing. So this is actually tubing, which is great for making, bales and rivets and like hinges and things like that. This is also tubing, and then this, of course, is copper pipe, which is pretty fabulous too. It's thick. We can cut into this, open it up, and then we have thick sheet to work with. So there's lots of different ways we can use that too.
Nice.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to show you today is how to take just round copper wire or even salvaged copper wire and kind of transform it and give it an artisan look so that you can make jewelry out of it. One of the great reasons why you would want to do that is that when you're a metalsmith and making jewelry, there's a lot of competition out there. And if you're selling your work out there in the marketplace, there's a lot of people that are using the same materials and sourcing the materials from the same places you're sourcing the materials.
Well, you can make it really distinctive, right?
Yes, yes. So by creating the wire yourself, then you are you're giving it your own look and your own spin.
Well, and take a look at these amazing patterns that you've made. And none of these seem like they're super difficult.
No, they're not super difficult at all.
But they totally give it your own look.
Yeah, so all of these wires here are made out of just plain copper wire. So, so what I want to show is how to just kind of transform it from round wire and make it look a little bit more like artisan wire. And just another side note is that when you're purchasing wire from even a jewelry supplier, round wire is the cheapest form that you can buy the wire in, and you can order fancy twisted patterned wire, but it's all a little more expensive. So that's another plus for doing it yourself. So you get the individual look of your own hammer marks and twisting and all that, and then it's a little less expensive too.
Well, and that gives you more margin.
That's right.
So you can actually make a living doing jewelry, which is
exactly. And then knowing that you made it completely all your own is pretty nice too.
Right.
And customers really appreciate the fact that you are ethically sourcing materials when you're, taking it from the recycling and reclaiming it and reusing it.
Well, it makes a great story. I can imagine.
Yeah. So that's great. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go with this big thick cable wire. So a lot of times when you get it at the metal recycling facility, and here's a couple of tips too. When I dig around in a place like that, I usually bring gloves because there's a lot of sharp things, that can poke you there. And I bring my own box. So you walk through the facility and you throw everything in a box. It's usually sold by the pound. And when I buy wire, let's say from a jewelry supplier by the pound, it costs maybe $20 and up for a 1 pound coil of copper. At the metal recycling facility, last time I purchased it, it was $4 a pound.
Perfect.
Yeah. So bring a box to put all the stuff in, and they can weigh it up for you, and you can go. And my metal recycling facility doesn't take checks or credit cards either. They just take cash. So something good to know.
Prepared.
Call ahead. Yeah.
I love all these bullet points.
So I'm going to go ahead and take some of the wire that's off of this bundle right here. So you can just unwind it. So here's a bigger piece. I'm not quite sure what size this is. I think it's probably about a 10 gauge. I have my little gauge. Sometimes it's good to bring this with you to the metal recycling facility. If you think you need a specific size, you can measure things while you're there. Yeah, so this is about a 10 gauge or a 2.5 millimeter size wire.
Well, that was a good guess.
Yeah. Get pretty good at that after a while.
I was going to say, it's not exactly a guess.
That's right.
Expert opinion. So how do we transform this into our pattern wire?
So
twist wire.
Yeah, so what I like to do is I like to cut this off in smaller, more manageable chunks. So I would cut a piece of it off like this. So here's one that's already cut. And then you want to straighten it just a little bit. Now I'm going to be using a bench block. So you need some really hard surface. You can use an anvil, a bench block, something metal behind it. And then a really simple basic tool. So this is like an old carpenter hammer. So I call it the grandpa hammer.
Yeah, don't use your favorite hammer here.
That's right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this wire and I'm going to flatten it. And then you can see how much different it looks. Looks less industrial, more handmade. So I'm using kind of even blows. I'm holding the hammer back toward the back of the handle, and that gives me a nice swing. I've got a lot of leverage. I don't want to hold the hammer up here because I don't have as much leverage. It's not doing as much work, and I'm absorbing a lot of the force into my wrist, which I don't want to do. So this is the most efficient way to do it. Now, as I go along the length of the wire, you can see that the wire is starting to flatten out. I can also see the hammer marks from this hammer, which is very scarred and used, and that texture is transferring into the wire, which gives it a really unique look. And the sides of this wire are kind of soft and bulgy looking, so that's a characteristic that happens. Now I can forge this out pretty thin if I want to, but I want to make maybe a cuff bracelet out of this. So I don't want to go too thin, so I'm going to keep it a little bit heavy. And then as I hit this, what's happening is the metal's compressing, and it's getting longer and it's getting wider at the same time. So as the force of the hammer pinches that soft metal in between these two hard surfaces, it's kind of pushing the soft metal out in every direction.
That makes sense.
It's also making this wire much harder than it was before. So if I flex back here, it's pretty soft and bendy, and over here it's pretty rigid.
All right.
So that's making just flattening wire. Okay, so that's flattened wire. If I want to make a true rectangle, I would just flip this wire up on its end like this and start forging from this side. And I'll forge it like this, and then I'll flip it and I'll forge it like this. Now the metal is moving against the hammer, and it's also moving against the bench block. So the surface that was against the bench block is nice and shiny, and the surface that had the hammer marks is a little bit duller, and it has that texture on it. So if we want to even that texture out, we want to flip it over and hammer it a little all the way around with the hammer. And that's making a rectangle wire.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And so next week when we come back, you're going to show us some things we can make with this, right?
Yes.
And we'll also do a couple of other techniques.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Julie.